Ladies and gentle gamers, welcome back to Be Determined. In today's video, we're going to be going over our guide to Kuudra from basic to expert. Before we jump into it though, I'd like to remind you to subscribe and drop a like on the video. We're very close to 20k subs, and after that, the next big milestone is 30k, which would get us red name on Hypixel. So if you want to help me out for free, drop a like on the video, smash the sub button, and without further ado, let's jump into it. Before we can really talk about the fight for Kuudra, we have to talk about the requirements to actually enter it. The first requirement is, of course, having done the Ellie questline and chosen a faction, which I do have videos on, by the way, so I'll try to have those linked in the description. But I've got one video on choosing a faction, one video for completing the Barb faction questline, and a video for completing the Mage faction questline. So if you haven't done those will be linked in the description. But once you've done that, you have the ability to fight the T1 Kuudra, but there's some armor sets and things you should have before you actually get into the battle. And the first item is, of course, the Hyperion. Now, if you're just doing your first time comp, as long as one person has a Hyperion in the party, you should be okay. But I really recommend getting a Hype if you're planning on running Kuudra quite a lot. Again, it's not fully required for T1, but after that, you need one. So I recommend going ahead and getting your hands on one of those. But again, if you can't afford one, a Glacial Scythe, a Yeti Sword, either one of those will do. Even a Midas Staff, of course, would be great, but preferably a Hyperion. You'll also, of course, need a decent Mage armor set. For T1 and T2, I'd say Storm is fine. You'll want a Gauntlet of Contagion and an Implosion Belt, of course, as well to help out a lot. And as for the other two armor pieces, you can get either some Molten pieces or some Vanquished gear would be fine as well. But for T1, we won't go into too much depth on the attribute. You're also going to want a Lava Fishing Rod. It doesn't have to be like Hypermax like this or Inferno, Hellfire, any of those. As long as it's just a starter fishing rod or anything like that, as long as you can fish in lava, that's what you need. You're also going to want an Ember armor set, the OG Ember armor set. It's pretty expensive, but it will help a lot with getting the different crates. But unfortunately, rekindled Ember armor will not work. Maybe they'll add a way in the future to get this Ember armor and it'll be cheaper, but as of me recording this, Ember armor is pretty expensive because you can't acquire it anymore, so you gotta buy an old set. Also, I'd recommend having at least an Overflux Power Orb. A flare of any kind works as well. Currently, you can get a Warning Flare for just 7 million coins. An Alert Flare or better would work as well, but these are kind of expensive and it grants 50% base mana regen, which is the main reason you would want this. But the Overflux grants 100% base mana regen. And the Mana Flux also gives 50% base mana regen, so if you're really wanting to get something cheap, at least a Mana Flux, but preferably an Overflux. Because even though you don't need all this stuff for T1, it is very helpful and you will need it for later tiers. As far as magical power goes, I would generally recommend around 700 at least, but most of the time I recommend having 1000 if you have a Hyperion, so if you've got that, great. If not, 700 should be fine. You're also going to want to have a stack of Ender Pearls on hand because you'll need these for what we're going to show in a minute. Plus, if you don't have a Hyperion, you'll want some sort of healing, so a Wand of Atonement would be great, but a Florid Zombie Sword would also work. You're also going to want this Open Shop item, which you can buy from the NPC over here. Whenever you go in game, you'll be able to access this menu and just buy an Open Shop item from there. This will just let you access the shop perks from inside Kuudra from anywhere as long as it's in your hotbar. I would also recommend having a short bow. It's helpful for taking out orbs, but this is not fully required for this tier. And of course, definitely not a Terminator. If you have a dragon short bow, most of the time you should have one of these at least. A dragon short bow works. You also want a Withercloak sword because dropships are probably going to happen early on. Once you get good at Kuudra, you should be able to avoid dropships happening, but sometimes they just happen. And I'd also recommend maxing out the left side of the Crimson Essence shop. You can see all the perks are really nice. Strong Arm, it gives your fishing rod extra pull. Fresh Tools lets you get double repair speed during the repair part of the fight. Kuudra Master gives you increased damage to the Kuudra minions. And Head Start lets you start the Kuudra boss fight with 50 extra tokens, which is very useful. But now that we've got the gear, let's jump into the fight. So you're going to want to start off by wearing the Ember armor set. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to swap your magical power over to Sighted. And I'm going to put everything on intelligence as well as far as my tuning points go. As far as pets are concerned, Blaze Pet is great, but any mage pet will do fine. You know, Baby Yeti if you need some extra defense, or even Sheep Pet would be fine. All right, so now we're in the actual Kuudra fight. I've unreadied just so that we have time to kind of go over the safe spots here and how to pre-grab supplies. So You can see on the ground there's all these different shapes. There's equals, triangle, there's a circle over here, you've got slash, you've got square, and X. So there's a lot of complicated things you can do to kind of work on prees, but early on, prees don't really matter too much. I'm probably going to be able to just grab this without the tentacles grabbing me. In T1, it's really easy. It did grab me, but it was too late. So early on, you can really just get away with grabbing them wherever. You may get caught, you may not. But as far as strategies go with the shop items and things, you're going to want to be on the specialist route. So pick specialist, and the main things to buy will be ballista mechanic, because that is the biggest part of this fight, is getting ballista mech. But sometimes you will get grabbed before you can actually go ahead and get these supplies. So if you're really struggling, you can get steady hands as well. But ballista mech is the main one to focus on. Now, when you're grabbing these, you do have to stand completely still. So if you're like moving around on the block, you know, it's going to cancel it. So you have to make sure that you stand still. I don't know why it didn't cancel it there. It should cancel it, but it didn't. But other than actually grabbing these supplies, there is another trick that you can do to make this go by a little bit faster. Again, we'll have more tricks later on as it gets harder and harder to grab them with tentacles. But you just grab this and you can throw the ender pearl before you actually grab it. And by the time it lands, you'll have grabbed the chest. So if you have bad line client, it does have some things to help you actually see where you need to throw the pearl. And there's some other mods out there as well. But after this, you just got to focus on building the ballista, which these Kuudra knockers can get really annoying. The zombie pigmen ones, they deal knockback and are very frustrating to deal with. So make sure to kill those as fast as you can. That would be why you would need a mage set. I'm still using the Ember armor set right now, but normally at this stage is when you would swap into your mage set. So let's go ahead and do that actually. Swap to the mage set, and then we will try and get through these supplies as fast as possible. You can see there in the chat it said fresh for me, because I have a mod that says whenever I get the fresh tools perk that we talked about earlier from the Crimson Essence shop. So if you have that, then that can help out a lot. But another thing you have to be careful about is there are drop ships. You see the gas up there. If that gas gets to the center, then it's bad for us, because he is going to destroy the entire fight pretty much. He deals a ton of damage if he gets to the center, which it looks like he's going to. I don't think we're going to be able to nuke him before he gets there. In these early versions, if you deal enough damage, you can generally kill him in time, but it doesn't matter too much. This is why you need the Withercloak sword. I didn't get it off in time, and you can see I got like 75% of my health done right there. So that can be a little annoying, but I'm going to go ahead and max out steady hands because I have a ton of tokens, and we are going to try and get these fuel cells. You can see I get it in like 3 seconds. And again, if you don't remember to pearl in time, you can just try swapping to your pearl. I have it on V is my hotkey for it, so you just spam that while you're holding the fuel cell, and spam right click as well, because like if I hit the V button, you can see it only lets me hold the pearl for a second, so you just have to get that timing right and it'll let you throw the pearl. But this is the main way that you're going to want to go ahead and get the ballista built. We've already built that part, but we just want to go ahead and actually get it charged. So you can see it's now at 100% charge. So the next time that Kuudra resurfaces, we are going to go ahead and right click and deal damage to him. So there he is resurfaced. We're going to right click with this, right click to fire, and it should one shot him. We can go ahead and get off of it, and we'll see the particles come out. There we go. And you can see his health at the top. He gets one shot by this at basic tier. Never mind, we actually do have to hit an orb into him. So make sure to hit an orb. That's why we need the short bow for this. So the next time he emerges, we would hit an orb into him. So normally what you'll want to do is hit an orb into him early on, because that will also make it so he doesn't submerge as fast. So we did it kind of backwards in this run, but generally what you'll want to do is while maybe your teammates are charging up the ballista, you go ahead and wait until he shoots an orb out. And there it is, he shot some orbs out. So we are going to go ahead and shoot the orbs back into him. And see, we just hit one orb into him, and that was enough, plus the ballista, to one-shot him. So as long as you've hit him with a single orb at least, he gets one shot. But after the fight, you get access to this chest, which I got a Breeze Lifeline Molten Necklace, which is not great. Lava Shell Necklace is what you'll generally wear in later versions, but generally you'll want to always take the chests because Crimson Essence is pretty expensive. Plus the Kuudra teeth and stuff usually sell for enough to make it worth it to buy the chest. But that is the first Kuudra fight. You don't really have to know too much to get through it. It's pretty simple. T2 gets a little bit more difficult, so the recs get a little higher. You're gonna have to have 1k rep in whatever faction you're in, as well as the T1 comp. I'd recommend having a little more magical power, you know, like around 800, 900 would be great, but 700 works fine. And the fight is pretty similar. So we're going to jump into a hot tier here. Again, you're going to want to make sure that you have your Ember armor on, because for this fight, you may have to actually use some different strats. So there's some regular strats you can do, and then some other strats that actually make the fight a little easier. We're going to go ahead and pick Specialist before the fight starts, because again, we do have 50 tokens at the start of the fight. But this is what's called a pre. You would just go ahead and grab the chest before the tentacles pop up. The chests do pop up before the tentacles, so you do want to go ahead and grab those. Again, we're going to use our Ender Pearls to go ahead and throw in. But let's say that all the tentacles spawned here and I was having trouble actually grabbing this supply. What I would do is drag it over to the safe spot. So for square, you pretty much always want to drag it over the safe spot, even if there's no tentacles. In the early versions, you can probably get away with it, but in later versions, you're always going to want to drag to the safe spot. So even if there was a tentacle right in front of me, they can't grab me on this block that I'm standing on right here. They won't notice me no matter what. So make sure that if you're grabbing the one at square, that was the one over by square right here, you stand on this block right here. This is the first safe spot that I'm going to show. There's a safe spot for pretty much every single one though. Now, if all the tentacles were over here at this one, which this is, I guess, X number 2, there's one that'll spawn at X over on this side and one that can spawn over on this side. What you can do is just stand on this block right here next to the cannon. Go ahead and pull in the supplies, and then you can go ahead and right click on the cannon. I'm sitting on the cannon right now. The tentacles can try and grab me, but it's just going to make me dismount the cannon and they won't be able to throw me. So there we go. All supplies again. I will show more pre's as we go on, because they're more important in the later tiers that you get to. In the early tiers, it's not that big of a deal because the tentacles don't generally grab very often anyways. But I'm going to swap to my mage setup here. You can see the mobs are doing a lot more damage this time than they did the first time around, so got to be a little bit careful with that. But again, we're just focusing ballista mechanic, and you can see it is just me and Witherslayer right now that are building this ballista. It's really easy to build in the early versions. In the later versions, it gets a lot harder. You'll generally have 4 people doing this, so it'll be a lot more difficult, but you'll have a lot more helpers, so twice as many people helping does make it a lot easier. But there we go, we got it built in time. This time, we do have to be a little bit more careful, though, because we do want to make sure we do about half of Kuudra's health with the orbs, so we're going to make sure we do that. Also, the blazes spawned. It's a good idea to shoot them quickly or take them down quickly with the armor, the storm gear, and the Hyperion. If you take them down all at once, you know, when they're early on up here, then you don't have to wait until they're all spread out later on. So if you take them down early, it's a good idea to do that. But we're going to be shooting orbs into him, and you can see his health is going down up at the top. Again, if you're struggling to survive, I recommend getting some vitality equipment. That will help out quite a bit if you have vitality on your either Vanquished or Molten set, but I did not get my Wither Cloak off in time. That hurt. So again, make sure to have a healing item. If you don't have a Hyperion, again, for T2, you should have a Hyperion. So that should be enough healing from the Wither Shield perk from Hyperion. But you can see he's getting kind of low now. The ballista is not charged, so we're going to go ahead and grab some more fuel cells real quick. Again, there's not one close here, so we don't have to do the cannon strat, but if there was a tentacle close, we would do the cannon strat. Okay, so he's below half health now. Honestly, we could just kill him with orbs, but since there's 2 of us, that would probably be faster. But when there's 4 of you, you generally want to go for the fuel cells. And you can see this tentacle is grabbing me, so the safe spot for this one is the hardest one to get. I am not in my Ember set, so I need to be careful because I'm taking a lot of damage from bouncing in lava. So this is, yep, right there. That's why you want to be in Ember armor, because that will happen. So make sure to wear Ember armor when you're doing this part. Swapping back to it on this stage is a good idea. But the safe spot for this section, this is called the shop spot, is right here, this little block right here. And it's pretty difficult to drag it back into, but if you crouch on the edge of the block, sometimes you can get it. But sometimes the tentacles will still grab you there. It just depends on the lobby, I think, but it's a little bit annoying. We can go ahead and right click with the ballista and go ahead and shoot it at him. And you can see his health is already pretty low from all the orbs we shot at him, but there it is. Normally, that'll do about half of his health, so you won't have to shoot as many orbs at him as we did. But after you shoot him down, you just got to survive the last little flail. Generally, you can AFK it, but if you're kind of lower level, you may not want to. Okay, so that was T2 and T1 of the Kuudra boss fight. Again, the Reqs aren't super duper high, other than Hyperion, of course. But this is the most late game part of the game out there, other than maybe M7. Those I'd say are the 2 most late game parts, and this is the easy part of the late game stuff. So Now we get on to T3, where you do have a bit of a higher gear requirement. At this point, I highly recommend having about 1000 MP. Plus, this is where you start needing a Terminator and at least a hot Terror armor set. Now, if you haven't invested in a Terror set yet, there are two options. If you're only going to be focusing on Kuudra for the foreseeable future, I recommend getting Lifeline Mana Pool. Again, once the Forging update comes out, this is going to be irrelevant, but that could be 2026 at this rate, so we'll go ahead and say make sure to get Lifeline Mana Pool if all you're focusing on is Kuudra. For me, personally, I have a Dominance Vitality set. Dominance is a lot worse for damage, but it is better for damage in every other aspect of the game, so like dragons, magma bosses, etc. If you're doing anything outside of Kuudra, Dominance is going to be better. But if all you're focusing on is Kuudra, Lifeline is the way. Now, I wouldn't focus on your attributes too much. Like, you want to make sure you have a good roll, you know, like have a good God roll, Lifeline Mana Pool, or Dominance Vitality. But don't focus on leveling them up too much because it really doesn't matter until you get to T5 Kuudra. So T3 and T4, it doesn't matter too much, but it's a good idea to go ahead and have those rolls so that you don't have to swap over your stars whenever you get a new set for T5. You can just go ahead and have that set ready by going ahead and buying it now, but don't focus on getting the attributes up, just focus on starring it. It needs to be hot tier to be able to do T3 Kuudra. Now, another thing that's going to help with this is having a precursor eye. So I'm going to go ahead and set my set up here. I've got my Terror set here. We're going to put the precursor eye on it. And basically the reason we want this is because for T3 and T4 Kuudra, we are going to have a hits phase, very similar to E-Man hits phase. So we're going to want to get as many hits in as possible. And of course, Terror gives us extra arrow stacks, so we'll be able to hit more arrows. Plus, you're going to want a precursor eye so that you can sneak and hit with the eye beam a bit more. And of course, the Terminator shoots 3 arrows at once. Plus, having duplex on it is very helpful. Even duplex 1 makes you shoot an extra arrow. Duplex 5 is going to be more necessary for later on because, you know, it does a lot more damage. But as long as you have duplex 1 on your Terminator, it'll be fine for T3 and T4. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put my Overflux Power Orb away. Again, if this is the max base mana region that you have access to, make sure to keep using an Overflux Power Orb, but if you're rich enough to get an SOS Flare, that's great, but again, totally not required at all for this tier. This is just what I'm going to be using because I have access to it. But I also recommend getting a Fire Veil if you haven't gotten one already. It'd be a good idea to have one of these from earlier on, just so that while you're building the Ballista, you can have the Fire Veil actively killing the mobs. But Fire Veil is very helpful. Now for T3 and above, there are actually 2 different roles that you can play. There's the DPS and the Stunner. So the Stunner is going to stun Kuudra after you build the Ballista. You don't actually shoot the Ballista in T3 and above. You just stun Kuudra and then do DPS to him with all these arrows, like we just talked about with Terror Armor, Precursor Armor, Duplex Term, all that stuff. But you'll have one person who stuns Kuudra so that the DPS can deal damage. So generally in a full party, you'll have 3 DPS plus 1 person stunning. So we're going to start off by showing off what you do as DPS. The main thing you're going to want to have is Toxic Arrow Poison on top of all the stuff I just mentioned. Toxic Arrow Poison, generally you're going to want to have at least 16, but normally I'd recommend just taking a full stack, doing it like this, 3, so you can just easily grab it in between rounds. So I'm going to take 21 Toxic Arrow Poison with me for this run. Now for T3 and T4, what will also help a lot with doing your damage in the hits phase is, of course, having as much attack speed as possible. So as far as magical powers go, generally what most people will run is the itchy one. If you're having trouble with getting more bonus attack speed, this will help out a lot. But you also want to have as much intelligence and ability damage as possible. So if you're not struggling to get your bonus attack speed, you can stick with having the intelligence from sided. But the main thing, if you're DPS, is you want to be using bonus attack speed as much as possible. But T3 and T4 are very similar. I believe Kuudra just has more health in the T4 fight. So we're just going to do the T3. Again, the Rex is beating the previous tier and 3,000 reps. So make sure you've done that. But now that we've gone through all the gear requirements, let's actually get into the fight. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-slash again. So we're just going to wait for the things to spawn. I'm going to click Specialist as always. And we just wait. Even as Stunner, you're always going to go Specialist for the most part, unless the party's pretty bad and you need a crowd control. But this is when we kind of actually need to hit this pre, because the tentacles do get a little tougher here. So we put the chest down. Again, we're going to try and do the safe spot on the square. There's some pretty crazy stuff you can do with some different pre's and things, which I'll show later on. But we hit our pearl that time. Now this one is surrounded by tentacles. So there's a trick that you can do for these that have a lot of tentacles around them, which is just pull it over to the edge. if you really have to. It takes a little bit of time, but this is pretty much a guaranteed way to get your chests. You have to sit under the border block. So I'm like hiding under a border block right now, and there's these border blocks on the edge. I'm just hiding under that. I'm gonna throw a pearl and try and get that in. There we go, and hit our chest right there. So you have to make sure that you get yourself underneath the border block, under the lava. That's why you need Ember armor. If you're wearing any other armor set, you're just dead. So there's a lot of tentacles around here as well. So I'm gonna do the trick again, pull it over to the edge, and here we go. Once again, make sure you've got a lot of pearls saved up because that will help out a lot. But we're gonna go ahead and throw this in. And is that a perfect pearl? Almost perfect. And there's no tentacles around this one. Slayer's got that. There we go. So we're gonna go ahead and swap back to our actual damage setup and try and deal some damage to these guys. There's different pre-strats for different areas. We've just shown the one for slash, but I'll go over all of those in a little bit. Before we get into T5, we'll actually get into those because it's really important for T5. The later tiers that you get to, the more important it is, because the tentacles get tougher and tougher. They actually start grabbing you a lot more often the later you get into it. So very important to go ahead and get as much pre-knowledge as you can. Normally we would have this done a lot easier, but we have half of the party right now that we would normally have, so that is why it's taking us so long. But as DPS, I need a TP all the way out and then go right here. Kuudra will emerge at the same spot every time. Make sure we have our cloak sword so that we don't die. Boom, and we're just gonna spam sneak, and I'm gonna deal as much damage as I can. And there we go. Solo DPS on Kuudra. Let's go. Precursor Eye coming in clutch. But again, the Toxic Arrow Poison helped a lot with that, because if you didn't see what Toxic Arrow Poison does, they deal an additional 10% of damage as poison and reduce healing by 24% over 4 seconds. It actually counts as an extra hit. So Toxic Arrow Poison is very, very helpful. And of course, Slayer gets a Wheel of Fate. That's one of the good drops you can get from Kuudra. One of the good reasons to do Kuudra. Wheels of Fate are pretty worth it. But what Slayer did was he did the stunning that time, we did the DPS. So this time we're going to do the stunning and show you how that works. The main thing with stunning is you're going to want any pickaxe. Any of them work. You can use a diamond pickaxe. You can literally use a wooden pickaxe and it will work fine. But you have to have your Heart of the Mountain tree set to Pickobulus. This will let you instantly break the thing that you have to break inside of Kuudra to get him to be stunned. So make sure you have Pickobulus chosen on your Heart of the Mountain tree, and you will be able to stun. Other than that, it's all the gear requirements I said before. You don't actually need Terror if you're stunning, because you don't do any damage. So if you can't afford Terror, you want to play stun, that's fine. But once you get to T5, even if you're stunning, you're going to need a Terror set. And there we go, it's built. We do need to take out some of these, but I have to choose Human Cannonball. Make sure you buy Human Cannonball. Then you left click on a cannon, and we're going to aim ourselves over at Kuudra. Make sure we have our mining tool. I'm going to use a drill. And then we just use Pickobulus on this, and Kuudra is stunned. But that's how you stun. And the T4 fight, I'm not really going to show because it's the exact same thing. Just Kuudra has more health, so make sure you deal more damage. But again, you saw me and Slayer were both able to solo DPS there. So if you have a full party that can't do it, skill issue. The only difference with T4 is I'd recommend upgrading your Terror to Burning, just so you don't have to spend a ton of money upgrading it all the way from Hot to whatever tier whenever you get to T5. And also make sure to get your hands on a little more magical power if you can help it. 1100, 1200 would be a good idea. But now we got to talk about T5, which is a whole different beast. Now for T5, you need a lot of stuff. First off, you got to have 12k rep in a faction, as well as the T4 comp, of course. And for T4 comp, you also need 7k rep for that completion, as well as T3 comp. So lots of stuff there. But I'd also recommend having at least 1.35 thousand magical power. The more the better, but that's the minimum. You're also going to want Fiery Terror with at least 5 or 10 stars. A decent Ragnarok axe. It doesn't have to have Chimera, but you know, if it does, that's awesome. If not, it's not required. Also, you'll need an Endstone sword as well as a Reaper armor set. Reaper swapping is very important. I didn't talk about this earlier, but probably want a G-Drag by this point. Generally for T3, T4, it's a good idea to have. Just lets you do more damage as Mage, but for T5, it is a requirement, as well as having a Warden helmet. So you're going to swap off the Precursor helm for the Warden helmet for this. With 4 people, you should be fine to do DPS. You'll have 3 people doing DPS and 1 person stunning, but at this stage, if you're struggling with the hits phase, then I don't know, man. You need a new party. Now, one more thing we should probably talk about is equipment. There's a couple different things that you can run. For me personally, I run a full Vanquish set, but it would probably be better to run a full Molten set. And generally, you'll want a lot higher attribute levels. I'd recommend having at least level 6, whether it's Dominance or Lifeline, either one. Level 7 would be even better, or as high as you can get it to go. It's very expensive, but it is worth it, at least for the time being. Again, once Forging Update comes out, it's not going to be helpful because you won't have it on your equipment anymore, so it won't really matter. So if you haven't bought all this stuff already, I wouldn't worry about it. If the Forging Update is real and it's actually going to come out, it will make God rolls irrelevant, so spending a ton of money on it before that happens is not the best idea. It would also be valid to run a Molten equipment set, like I said earlier, because you gain extra damage resistance while fighting Kuudra, so if you want to spend some extra money, then a Molten set would be better than Vanquish set. But you could also wear an Implosion Belt or a Gauntlet of Contagion if you're really struggling with clear, or swap out your armor pieces during the fight if you're wanting to get really sweaty. But again, that's not required. But before we actually jump into the fight, I do want to show you guys how the pre's work. There's some crazy strats for how to pre, because there are 7 possible chest spawns and only 6 chests that will spawn. So depending on which one doesn't spawn, there's different strats. So here's the graphs for those. So this X shows that this one didn't spawn, but all these black circles are possible spawn locations. All the arrows are where you would normally start. So for example, if square doesn't spawn, then if you're slash, you go ahead and grab slash, and then you go ahead and grab the second X spawn. If you are the one preing X, then you grab X, and then you go help out with shop. Same thing for triangle, you grab triangle, and then go help out with shop, and then equals, you grab equals, and then go help out with shop. And then if slash doesn't spawn, then slash grabs square and pulls it over, and then goes and works on shop, while triangle grabs triangle, then goes over and grabs square, which slash had already pulled over to the safe spot, and triangle just grabs it. And you can see what each individual thing does. Here's the key on the top left up here. So slash is blue, X is yellow, equals is green, and triangle is red/pink. So there was the first graph right here. If square doesn't spawn, this is what you do. If slash doesn't spawn, this is what you do. If second X doesn't spawn, this is what you do. If equals doesn't spawn, this is how you should do it. If triangle doesn't spawn, this is what you do. If shop doesn't spawn, everyone claps their hands and we actually have a good run. And if X doesn't spawn, this is what you do. So huge shout out to Kuudra gang for all of this info, and also huge shout out to Future77. Fly high, brother. Thank you so much for all of this info. Had to use a Ouija board to get all this, but huge shout out to him. His YouTube will be linked in the description. So yeah, that's the pre's. It's pretty complex stuff. I recommend just choosing a single route to go, you know, like if you're equals, stick to equals for a little bit until you've got that memorized. And then if you want to, you can start swapping around and learning the different routes for the different areas. But again, this is where preing is the most important, because with T5, if you miss the pre, you are getting grabbed. Sometimes even if you hit the pre, you're still getting grabbed. It is pain. Now that you know the routes and stuff, let's talk about the actual safe spots and the strategies you should use for each individual supply. You don't actually have to be doing these only in T5s. I'm just waiting until now to show it, because generally you're not going to get this sweaty until T5, and also T5 is the hardest one, so you really need these tips and tricks for this section. But huge shout out to Kuudra gang. Their Discord server will be linked in the description. So the first pre is right here at triangle. So what you'll do is you'll go up to this block right here, stand on this right here, and throw out your rod. The supply can spawn anywhere out in front of you right here, but you'll just try and pull it in and make sure you don't get grabbed. If you do get grabbed though, if it's too slow, if it spawns out too far, then you'll have to jump in the lava and pull the supply all the way over to this cannon right here. And then you can use the cannon strat, right click on the cannon after you've started grabbing the supply. If a Kuudra tentacle grabs you, it's gonna put you down right here. So you just right click again and you'll get back on the cannon and he won't be able to throw you. For slash, like I showed earlier, you're gonna want to pull from about here and try and pull it in. Sometimes it can spawn like really close here, but if you stand here, then these tentacles that spawn on this side can grab you, and that can be pretty problematic. So you'll want to grab it from this slab or further to the left generally. If that fails, if you do get grabbed by a tentacle over on this side or something, then you can either pull it out all the way over here to the borders and try and get it here. But there are 4 possible tentacle spawns. There's one up there, one over here, one back there, and one here. If all 4 of those spawn, you're going to have to drag it like all the way over to the square safe spot, which takes a little bit. It's very annoying, but that's the best way to do it. If this tentacle here doesn't spawn though, then you can usually just drag it over here to the right a little bit and try and pull it in here. And none of the tentacles should be able to grab you unless this tentacle here is spawned. And if the tentacle on this side doesn't spawn, then you should be fine grabbing it over on these slabs and blocks here. All right, the next spot is over here at equals, so you can stand down here on these stairs. And again, the supply can spawn anywhere out in front of you, so you just try to pull it in. If you get grabbed by a tentacle, then if the tentacle is one that spawns here, you can drag it over to this cannon. But if the tentacle right here does not spawn, then you can just drag the chest back over into this section and you'll be able to grab it in this little inlet right here. Now for X right here, there's two different spawns. So the first one is on this section. You can just stand on these blocks here and try and grab it. But if you get grabbed by tentacles, you can either try and pull it over here to the left if this tentacle doesn't spawn. If that tentacle does spawn though, it's best to just drag it back here to the border and try and grab it from underneath the border block right there. Now there's a second supply that spawns here, which will be over in this section. If there's no tentacle that spawned right here, you can drag it over to this section and try and pull it in here. If it did spawn though, then you're better off just trying to pull it over to the cannon. If the tentacle here didn't spawn, then you can just pull it here and grab it without having to mount the cannon. But if there is a tentacle here, then you will have to mount the cannon. Now for shop, this is the one close to triangle. It will spawn over in this section right here. If there's no tentacles around, you can usually grab it right here, but generally there will be tentacles around. So you're gonna have to drag it all the way over here and try and get it from this little block right here. But sometimes the tentacle can still grab you here. So again, like I said earlier, you will have to copter it. So in that scenario, you try and grab the chest, and when the tentacle starts reaching for you, you just teleport around in a circle, and then someone else will grab it while the tentacle is trying to grab you. And then, as I said, for square, there's this safe spot right here. So you can always just drag the chest straight over to here. But that is all the safe spots. So now we talk about stunning and DPSing and how it's different in T5 than T4. So the hits phase is the same as it was in T4. Kuudra just has a bit more health per usual, but the main difference is going to be after that you get the real DPS phase. So to prep for that, there's a few different swaps and damage buffs that you're going to want to give yourself in this time between the finish of the hits phase and the start of the DPS phase. So what most people do is you'll swap to your Reaper armor and also use your Ragnarok axe, which you can see that's what I'm doing. But if you do have lifeline, then you're going to want to also have a few other things. You're going to need a Staff of the Volcano and a Wand of Strength. And the reason for that is because the Staff of the Volcano creates an explosion that will cost half of your HP. So use the Staff of the Volcano once to get rid of half of your health. And again, the reason we're doing this is because of the Lifeline perk. When you're under 20% of your max health, your damage and defense get increased because of Lifeline. So we're trying to get rid of as much of our health as we can so that we're below 20% max HP. So that's why we use Staff of the Volcano once. That gets rid of 50% of our health. And you're also going to need a Wand of Strength, because this will cost 10% of your health. So to get down to 20%, if you're on full HP, you're going to use this 3 times and the Staff of the Volcano 1 time. But if you have a little bit less health, you'll have to use the Wand of Strength a little less. And if you're below 50%, you won't be able to use the Staff of the Volcano. So you're going to have to kind of eyeball it just a little bit. But the reason it's okay to use Lifeline and Kuudra is because you don't take any damage in the 5th part of the fight unless you're getting one tapped. If you take any damage at all, you're getting one tapped generally. So as long as you're not like jumping in the lava, you should be fine even on 20% HP. If you are a Lifeline enjoyer though, you will want to make sure you are using a lava shell necklace. This is the key to Lifeline actually working in Kuudra, because the ability of the lava shell necklace is it sets your health regen, mending, and vitality to 0. So you're not going to heal at all. So generally, I think you'll swap to this in the last stage of the fight. You don't really want this before while you're taking damage from all the clears and stuff, unless you're really, really good at the game. But there are a few things you'll want to do differently. If you're a Lifeline user, you're generally going to want to go ahead and start using your Wand of Strength here and your Staff of the Volcano as well. Go ahead and get your health down a bit lower. And make sure you have your Lava Shell Necklace equipped here as well. But everything else should be the same for Dom and Lifeline users. You're going to need a Reaper armor set to swap to. You'll just swap to this, hit shift, and then swap back to your normal armor, as well as use your Ragnarok axe. So generally, you'll hold your Rag axe, right click, and then type /wardrobe or whatever other commands you can do with mods. If you have a hotkey for it, that works. But you'll hold your Rag axe, swap to your Reaper set, hit shift, swap back to your other armor set. You're also going to want to make sure you have that Endstone Sword ready for this section, because that's going to activate everyone on your team's ferocious mana procs. so that you're doing a lot more damage to Kuudra. And then the main part of the Kuudra fight is pretty much just dodging tentacles and dodging the TNT. You want to just stay out of the red areas, and also make sure you don't get hit by these orbs that Kuudra throws out. If you're within a certain radius of those, you will get one tapped as well, so make sure you shoot those off into the distance. This is also the part of the fight that you're going to want to use your Twilight Arrow Poison. Again, usually I use about 16, just so that I know we're going to get a decent amount of hits on him. As long as you hit him once with it, he's got that effect for the next 20 seconds, and usually the damage phase will be done within 20 seconds if you've got a decent party. But that is the gist of the Kuudra fight as DPS. Now let's talk about the stunner perspective. So the stun is going to be the same as it was in T3, at least very similar for the first part. You're going to left click on the cannon. If you want to, you can go ahead and get into your wardrobe while you're left clicked on the cannon, waiting for the countdown to go down, and swap to your Reaper armor set there. Then you're going to want to make sure you have a pickaxe or a drill in your hotbar so that you can do the stun, and then swap over to Ender Pearls. Throw one straight up in the air, and then you'll hold your rag axe, but don't use the ability yet. Kuudra's going to throw you out, and then the Ender Pearl will land, and you'll get teleported back in. That's when you use your rag axe. That's when you shift with the Reaper armor, and then you can swap back to your terror set. And again, if you're lifeline, you can do all the lifeline things as well. On top of that, the Wand of Strength and the Staff of the Volcano. Make sure you get your health down. Make sure you swap to your Lava Shell necklace as well if you weren't on it already. And then you'll also want your Endstone Sword to make sure Ferocious Mana is proccing on all your teammates. And then the fight after that is the same as it is for DPS. You're just dealing damage. Also, if someone hasn't Last Breath by this point already, make sure that you Last Breath. Just a good idea to go ahead and get that done right off the bat, just in case somebody hasn't done it. Because generally, the person stunning is going to be the one with the worst DPS. So if you're a dominance user and the rest of your party is lifeline, you're generally going to be the one stunning. I'm usually the one stunning. But that is the stunner POV. And as of the start of 2025, that's almost everything you need to know about Kuudra. There is a couple other tricks that I'm going to show real quick that are for the super ultra giga sweats. This first one is a tip for preing that can help out a lot if you miss it. You're going to want to go into your pets menu and equip a skeleton horse. So what will help is to hit shift left click to toggle it as a favorite item. So that will make it go all the way up front to one of your first slots. So then you're not going to have to go back to one of the later slots, but you can do that. You'll equip your skeleton horse and he'll stand right here. And then if the tentacles are trying to grab you, you can just throw a pearl into him and just spam pearls. You're generally just going to spam pearls here. And then when you run out of pearls, you're going to want a hotkey on your keyboard that is get from Sax Ender Pearl 16. So instead of typing all that out, you'd have a hotkey on your keyboard that would do that. And you just spam pearls down while the tentacle is trying to grab you, and it should let you keep the supply. There's also another strategy called rending, which you've probably heard of if you're into the super late game stuff. But the admins have recently announced that this is going to be patched pretty soon. Plus, it's like ridiculously expensive to get into, like tens of billions of coins on specific setups just to be able to do this. It's not useful for anything else in the game. Future tried telling me about it, but the connection to the afterlife was a little bit low. And also, I'm not smart enough to understand it, but this is some of the gibberish that I heard.
You may know, use a rend bone meringue. It only works on front peak and left peak. Like, you know, when you get TP down there, if he spawns in front of you or to the left of you, throw your boomerang. Like, you run up to Kuudra, throw the boomerang.
So that's how you rend. But if you want a little bit more in-depth than that, you can check out Swavy's video. He did a video recently on one-shotting Kuudra, and that was talking about how to rend. So make sure to check out his video on that if you're stupid rich and you really want to know how to do it. But as of 2025, that is all you need to know about Kuudra. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to drop a like, smash the sub button. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in the comments. I tried my best to cover everything, but I'm sure I missed something, so make sure to leave a comment talking about it if I did miss something and you know what it is. And if you're curious what I missed, make sure to check the pinned comment, because whatever I missed that's actually important, I will throw it in the pinned comment. But as far as I know, that's everything. I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Have an amazing rest of your day, and God bless.